Hello again. You all look really good this morning, can I just say? So, I had a friend whose daughter was starting t-ball. She was 5 years old, and so she was starting to play t-ball, and she was going to practices and learning the rules and learning to hit the ball and run the bases, and was really excited. She was really into this. And so the big day came for the game, the first game. And so, as families will, they gathered the snacks and the drinks and the orange slices. And she braided her hair, put on her uniform for the first time, tied her shoes. And they headed off in their van to the field for the game. Well, when they got there, she ran out excited, couldn't wait. Gathered with the other girls, and the coach brought them together and reminded them of the rules and said, we're just here to have fun. Just have fun today. So the game started, and things are going pretty well. If you've ever been to a 5-year-old t-ball game, you know the scenario, right? One little girl's off in the field chasing a butterfly, another one's playing with the laces on her glove. Some of the girls are in the dugout practicing their dance moves. This is the way it goes, right? But she was very intent. She was watching everything. She was remembering everything. And so the time came for her to get up to bat. So she got up to the tee and she hit the ball, and it was a really good hit. And so she started to run like the coach had told her to, and she ran to first base, and the crowd was cheering, and the ball, of course, passed that, first little girl who was chasing bugs. She ran to second. Somewhere out there, someone was investigating an anthill that they had discovered. So, as she came around second and then third, the ball was lost somewhere in the outfield. And so her coach at third base is signaling her, keep going, keep going. And all of a sudden, somewhere between third and home, she just stopped. Stopped and put her hands on her hips and stomped off the field. Well, everybody was a little perplexed by that, but you never know what's going on in the mind of a 5-year-old. So she stomped back to the dugout and sat down on the bench and was done. Well, things just carried on because, that's how it is with 5-year-olds. So they kept playing the game, finished the game. Mom asked her on the way home, she's like, what was going on? Why did you just stop running? She said, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, so she gets home, they have a snack. The mom thinks, well, maybe, I don't know, who knows? Maybe she got a cramp in her foot. Maybe she, saw something. Who knows? So she noticed as the week went on and then she went to practice, she was maybe not quite as enthusiastic as she had been, but she still seemed to be enjoying herself and having fun. So it came to the second game. Kind of same scenario. They were all playing, having fun, and she gets up to bat, and second time she makes another hit. Starts running the bases, going to first, rounding second. Again, the ball lost somewhere in the outfield, coming around third, heading home, when all of a sudden again, she just stops and is like, stomps off the field, goes and sits down on the bench and refuses to play the rest of the game. So the mom goes up to the coach afterwards and says, do you know what's going on? He's like, I have no idea. And so on the way home, she's trying to talk to her and say, honey, what's upsetting you? And they get home and she gives her a snack and then she sits down and she said, you really need to tell me what's going on. Why did you just run off the field? You seem to be having so much fun. You like your coach. You like to play. She's like, I don't want to play anymore. She's like, well, why not? She said, the coach doesn't like me. She's like, well, what makes you think the coach doesn't like you, honey? He said you're one of his best players. You seem to really, have been enjoying yourself. She's like, the coach doesn't like me. It's like, well, honey, you need to tell me what's going on. Why do you think that? And she said, well, I get up there and I hit the ball like he told me to, and I run around the bases like he told me to, and then I'm starting to come around third in order to score, and he starts screaming at me, go home, go home. True story. Have you ever noticed that we have a tendency to make up information when we don't have the whole picture? Have you ever noticed that about human beings, about yourself? I mean, think about when you send a text message, maybe something important or something you're taking a chance in saying, and all of a sudden those dots appear and then they disappear. We make up stories, don't we, about why that is. Think about all the times in our life and all the experiences that we've had where maybe we didn't have all the pieces to the puzzle. Maybe we didn't have the knowledge we needed in that moment. Maybe we were, at a developmental level in our life where we couldn't understand the whole scenario. That's often what happens with children when their parents get divorced. They blame themselves because they have no context for this idea that parents are separate, that their relationship is separate, and that what's going on with them is not about them as a child. But they don't have that awareness and understanding yet, so they think it must be me. This happens so many times in our life where we make these interpretations and these assumptions because we don't have all the information or we don't have all the understanding. And, our brain also doesn't like missing pieces. So when we don't have information, we tend to fill that in. We tend to create a story or a meaning around what's happening, just like that little girl did. She didn't understand that the coach was telling her to go score, go to home base. So when we look to the future is a whole unknown quantity, right? It's all missing information. We can speculate. We can maybe look at patterns and try to determine what's going to happen. But in reality, what happens after this moment is unknown. It's all missing information, and our brain doesn't like that. So it fills in the gaps, creates a story. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but those stories tend to be more negative than positive. When you think about those 3 dots that after you sent that text message, is your first thought when you're waiting for an answer that's important, oh, they probably just had to run to the store. Maybe someone knocked on the door. They'll get back with me. Maybe they're taking a little time to, think about this because they really care, giving me a thoughtful response. No, we freak out, don't we? It's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I send that in the first place? We often go to the negative, and there's a reason for that. It's our brain's wiring. We have this part of our brain that many refer to as the primitive brain, because it comes from that ancient time when we were out in the wild trying to survive. And we had to be very aware of the physical dangers around us. We had to pay attention to the noises, the animals, the environment, the other tribes, because there was danger out there. So our brain's wiring helps keep us safe. It's always on the alert for what could go wrong, what could be dangerous. But our brains don't know the difference between an actual physical threat, like an elephant charging at us, and a perceived threat, something that we imagine in our minds. And so there's this concept called negativity bias that comes with that. We're always looking for problems because we want to protect ourselves. So we tend to fixate on what's wrong and sometimes miss out on all the things that are right. My mother was an amazing artist. She was an oil painter. But she was a bit of a perfectionist when it came to her art. And so I remember I have this painting of hers still that she did. It reminded her of her little brother when he was young. And it was this little boy, and he is leaning on a dock, and he's dipping his hand in the water. And it's beautiful. I mean, so realistic. I try to be the painter that she is. Amazing artist. But I remember more than one time her staring at that painting going, I never did get that hand quite right. Now, I'd like to say I didn't inherit any of that, but it still shows up once in a while. How often do we fixate on that little thing that didn't go right? That one thing we said that we maybe said incorrectly? That one edge of the cookie that's burned instead of the 11 other of the dozen that are perfect? That's our brain's wiring. And it's amazing. And it's meant to protect us, but it can also get in the way. Our brains are also problem-solving machines. So we are always, trying to figure things out. And we love it when we can do that. Any of you Wordle fans? New York Times? Yeah. When we have a problem to solve and we figure it out, it feels good, doesn't it? We get that dopamine hit. If someone comes to us and says, hey, can you help me with this? And we're able to help them and we're able to come up with a solution, it feels good. And that problem-solving ability is amazing. It's an amazing thing we have. I spent 20 years in my career at Children's Mercy, and the number of things that have come out of the research department because of that ability to problem solve are astounding. But it can also get in our way, especially when we think about relationships and people. Have you ever tried to problem solve someone else? It doesn't go so well, does it? And so we have this amazing ability, but we also have to keep it in check. Because as we look to what is in the future, as we look to the unknown and try to problem solve it, we don't have all the information. So let's review. When we don't have all the information, when we don't have the whole picture, like the future, we make up stories. We fill in the gaps. And those stories tend to be negative because of our negativity bias. We tend to anticipate the problems that might exist there so we know how to cope with them. So how do you think that might be impacting your view of what's going on in the world right now? We don't have all the information, do we? As we try to figure it out, we get overwhelmed. We try to fill in the gaps because we're afraid of what it means. And so then we make up anticipatory stories about what it's all about. But we don't have all the information. Worry usually comes from this idea that there's missing information. And so as we try to anticipate what that means, it creates anxiety for us. But have you ever had a situation in your life where something didn't work out? So maybe you applied for that great job, you were hoping to get it, it didn't happen. Or maybe you were in a relationship that you thought, I think this might be it, and it ends up not working. And then later down the road, you end up finding a different job that's even better. Or maybe it caused you to create a shift in your career and you ended up on a path you didn't expect that really was more fulfilling. Or maybe that relationship ended, and after you moved past the heartache of that, you ended up finding someone that was actually a better fit. It's a happier relationship. Have you ever had that happen? So in the moment when we experience that, we think, this is it. This is the worst. I'm heartbroken. I'm devastated. But then over time, maybe we grow from that experience. Maybe we learn something. Maybe we come to understand what we don't want. Maybe it takes us in a different direction. And it allows us to prepare for what's next. Now, in the moment, we weren't feeling that, were we? It was like, this is it. This is what I wanted. I didn't get it. I hate it. It hurts. But then looking back, we go, oh, gosh, I see now. I see now. It's almost like there was a plan. Maybe a plan we couldn't see at the time, but retroactively we look at and go, wow, now that I think about it, A led to B led to C, and I wouldn't be here right now in this great relationship or in this job or in this career or in this moment if I hadn't had all that happen. It was preparing me. It was making me ready. So when we look at our world right now, on the surface, there's a lot of chaos happening. It's a lot of things coming at us, and there doesn't seem to be a plan. Not one that I can see anyway. And we can't predict the future. There's a whole lot of unknowns sitting out there in front of us. And in our brain's reaction to that, we make up stories about what it could be, what it could hold, what that outcome might be leading us to. That's our negativity bias at work when it takes us down that road of worry and stress and anxiety. But here's what I know about change. I've spent a lot of my career studying change. I have an executive coaching business, so I've done a lot of consulting with organizations and with leaders. And so I've looked at how change impacts each of us. And what we know about the laws of change is that energy, whatever that energy is, has to be broken up before something new can be created. So we see this in nature, right? A seedling, a little seed in the ground has to break open in order for that sapling to emerge. We see this all the time in the law of thermodynamics and how fuel is transformed into heat, photosynthesis. There's all kinds of examples of how energy has to be broken up for something new to emerge. It's the law of physics. And in my coaching business, I've seen this again and again as I work with individuals, whether it be breaking down old beliefs, old patterns, in order for some new form of leadership to emerge, or in organizations, having to break up what was before something new can be. And it's all just energy. Our thoughts are energy, our actions are energy, it's all just energy. So how do we want to use that energy? David Owen Ritz says that every challenge and problem in your life has a hidden gift within it. That gift might be new wisdom you are ready for, experience you'll need further down your path, or the opportunity to change or redirect yourself. As a general rule, the bigger the challenge you find, the bigger the potential good you can realize from it. Let's hear that again. The bigger the challenge you find, the bigger the potential good you can realize from it. When you remind yourself of this truth and label the challenge you face good, in spite of outer appearances, you call forth its hidden potential. Merely uttering a comforting affirmation does not call forth a hidden potential. Rather, you must build a deep conviction that everything in your life is there ultimately to serve you. That may not be evident at first glance, but it is one of the greatest truths of life. Everything in your life is there ultimately to serve you. We are always in flux. In Buddhism, they call it the law of impermanence. This idea that things are always moving and that everything is fleeting. So this moment that we are in, this time we are in, is fleeting. It's not going to last forever. At the same time, knowing that, we can appreciate every moment, knowing it's not going to come again. And our spiritual principles teach us that what we focus on is what we create. Ritz invites us to find the blessing, even in the middle of chaos or uncertainty. So what do we want to focus on? Where do we want to put our energy? What story do we want to tell? Energy can be destructive, but it is also creative. So that could be a story we might want to tell. Because our brains have, these grooves and these patterns as we've reinforced some of the negative stories. We have to work with our body's chemistry and our brain wiring and start to form new grooves by reinforcing the story we want to tell instead. A story that may lead us forward with a little more hope, with an understanding that we can use that creative energy, each one of us, to make a difference. So maybe instead of it being a problem, what if it's an invitation? What if it's an invitation for each one of us to step up and figure out what is ours to contribute? What is the story we want to tell? Because we each have that opportunity. We are each being issued that invitation. There is order in the universe. We see that in nature as well. And soon we're going to see that little sapling that was that seed that broke apart emerging through the earth. Hopefully sooner than later. This idea that sometimes things need to be broken apart and things look chaotic. And in the midst of it, it can seem like a huge problem. But we don't yet have the big picture. We don't know what the future holds. So what if that problem is actually an invitation? There was a man named John Kralik who found himself in 2007 with his life kind of falling apart. He was an attorney. His law practice was not succeeding. He was going through a divorce. It created tension in his relationships with his children. He lost his home. Seemed to be a really bad time in his life. And so he decided to go out for a hike one day. And he just sat in the woods and he stared out at nature. And he suddenly had this question occur to him, as he was ruminating on all these problems that were showing up in his life. He's like, well, what do I have to work with here? What do I have going for me that I can maybe lean on and lean into? What do I have to be grateful for? And what he decided to do in that moment was every day for the next year, write a thank you note and a note of appreciation to someone. So it started with, a note to his kids, a note to the barista at the coffee shop who fixed him his drink every morning, a note to a former colleague who really made an impression on him. And as he did that, he began to have a shift in mindset. He began to suddenly look for the blessings in his day. He began to embody this idea of abundance and notice the blessings that were around him. And he ended up writing a book, 365 Thank Yous. The year a simple act of gratitude changed my life. So I would ask you this morning, What is the story you want to tell going forward? Can we tap into that energy of creativity that is calling us? Can we look at the problems that are in front of us and see them as an invitation? An invitation for each of us to turn within and to tap into that power that we have, that creative energy that we have, that amazing ability that we have in our own unique way to make a positive contribution. So what is yours to do? And I don't mean the general you. I mean you, 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 you. What is yours to do? What is the story that you want to tell with your life, starting the minute that you leave this sanctuary? Do you want to be a wren? Let's be a wren. Namaste.